Welcome to my channel people. Author link will be on description. Make sure to check it. In a village that was close to Konoha, people were currently cheering a wandering doctor that just saved a hopeless small kid from an unknown illness that was plaguing him for months, and they lost all hope in saving him. But then this doctor called Shino arrived at the scene, and to the disbelief of the villagers, he was actually able to treat the ill kid. Shino was an elderly man with long gray hair that flows out at the back and mutton chops connected to his beard of the same color. His eyebrows were thick and of a darker gray, but neatly trimmed. He also had yellow eyes with dark bags around them, and tear troughs under them, giving a somewhat stern look. He wore a black shirt with a white GI with brown and blue edges over it, and further a sleeveless red jacket with gold sidings over that, and simple blue pants. He also originally wore a dark red bandana, but the joyful and happy village was suddenly visited by three people. They were quite the terrifying trio that didn't come to share the villagers in their happy atmosphere. "Did you locate our target?" asked Fugaku to Mukai, whose left eye turned completely white and had many veins stretching out from it. "Yes, he's currently at the village chief's home. I must say, this guy's acting is perfect. If I didn't have enough information about him, I probably wouldn't have thought he was up to no good," replied Mukai while observing Shino's behavior intently without missing a beat. "That's good," said Fugaku to Mukai before he turned to Minato and said, "Minato, it's up to you to lead him to our trap. Don't worry, according to what we know, he's quite weak before he transforms, so catching him off guard shouldn't be a problem," replied Minato calmly, and Mukai and Fugaku quietly nodded at him before they both flickered away to where they laid a trap for Shino. Seeing them leave, Minato's eyes turned a shade colder as he looked at the location of the house where Shino was currently staying before he disappeared at a terrifying speed and appeared right outside of it, and he could hear the people inside having a huge celebration. "Shino-sama, this is a huge blessing for our village to have you visit us," said the village chief, bringing a frown to Minato's face. "That's true. If not for you, I can't imagine what could have happened to our son. Thank you so much," said a woman tearfully. Clearly she was the mother of the kid that Shino treated, and beside her was her husband that was also shedding tears of joy and thanking Shino for saving their son. Just why would such a person turn so evil when he can bring so much happiness, thought Minato with a frown before he suddenly disappeared from his position and appeared behind Shino, and before the latter or any of the villagers could react. Minato put his hand on his shoulder and they both immediately disappeared thanks to the flying thunder god jutsu. In a man-made cave that was filled with all kinds of seals for the purpose of restricting and suppressing. Minato suddenly appeared along with Shino, and Fugaku and Mukai, who were waiting for them, immediately activated the seals to completely immobilize Shino. Shino at first was disoriented by the sudden change in environment from Minato's jutsu, and then he was suddenly hit by a strong wave of weakness as well as he couldn't move at all as some dark chains held him in place. But the realization of having been kidnapped quickly reached his mind. What's going on? Was I discovered? How? Thought Shino before he started observing his surroundings, and his eyes landed on the trio that kidnapped him, causing them to constrict. Minato was hooded so he couldn't identify him, but he was terrified by the identity of the other two. What's the Hokage and the traitor Mukai doing together? Shino recognized Mukai because he even planned to approach him at some point and use the excuse of healing his son to get his loyalty, but then he suddenly disappeared and not much was known about him, not to mention that he then heard that Tsunade healed his ill son, so he gave up completely on those plans. But now seeing him along with the terrifying Hokage sent chills down his spine. Was my identity exposed? Impossible. I left no clues. Unless that snake sold me out. No, he wouldn't. He still desires my medical mastery and wouldn't give it up so easily. Not to mention, who in the hell is this hooded person? Was he the one that brought me here? Did he use space jutsu? Shino's mind was overwhelmed by all kinds of thoughts, leaving him almost speechless, but being a master spy wasn't for nothing, and he quickly regained his calm and decided to play it dumb until he confirms what this trio knows about him. Maybe the situation isn't so hopeless, he thought before he said, "Gentlemen, what's going on here? If you want my help, I would gladly provide it without any need for this." Fugaku's Sharingan was already active as he observed every change on this man's face, and he was surprised by how quick he regained his calm, and he couldn't help but think, this guy is really dangerous. Now I understand why Bakurio gave him so much attention. Mukai and Minato shared similar thoughts with him, But the latter easily saw through this. Dr. Sahi said, "Shino, please explain to us all you know about dark chakra, and do not try to hide anything." Shino felt a chill when he saw two blue lights shining from under the darkness of the hood, and hearing what Minato said made him understand that his biggest secret was exposed. So his gentle smile quickly turned into a twisted one as he said, "Oh, I didn't think you bastards from Konoha actually know about dark chakra. How surprising. Where did you get that knowledge from?" Fugaku narrowed his eyes at how relaxed this man was acting while facing such a hopeless situation. What makes him so fearless? Thought Fugaku thoughtfully while Mukai simply stared at the man lazily while drinking silently, his thoughts unknown. "I will ask again. Tell us everything you know about dark chakra," said Minato in a cold tone, but Shino with the same twisted smile tilted his head and said, "Or what?" "Or this," said Mukai, and before Shino could react, Mukai's kick was already coming in contact with his stomach, which made his face twist in agony from the terrible amount of pain he was feeling. Then, Mukai lifted him from his long white hair and said, "Now, are you going to explain?" Mukai could see Shino stare at him with a face full of agony, but that face suddenly changed back to the same twisted smile as the latter tried to catch him off guard and punch him, but Mukai calmly dodged it by tilting his head. "That tickles," said Shino, still with a twisted smile as a dark current started revolving around his body, and the Konoha trio stared speechlessly as the normal-looking man in front of them seemed to go against the tides of time as his white hair turned black and his slim body started getting bigger and bigger, transforming like Hulk until his clothes got ripped apart from his huge size except for his wide pants as he turned into a human specimen. "It seems the seals designed for normal chakra didn't work against this kind of chakra," muttered Minato while staring at the transformed doctor, and seeing that they might be forced to kill him at this point and won't get any information. Fugaku suddenly gestured to Minato for a change in plans and the latter immediately disappeared. "I can't wait to crush all of you Konoha bastards like a bug. Marvel at my greatness," exclaimed Shino before he rushed at Fugaku with a terrifying speed. After Shino transformed into his superhuman form, Mukai ended up losing his grip on him, and to his surprise, Shino decided to target Fugaku out of three of them despite Mukai being the one that just kicked him in the stomach. Is he targeting Fugaku on purpose? Mukai was perplexed, but this feeling was overwhelmed by the transformation the man in front of him had just undergone that granted him a perfect body beyond what any human could achieve. So, driven by his curiosity, Mukai immediately activated his Byakugan to see the reason for these changes, and both Minato and Fugaku noticed this even though most of their focus was on Shino and how to catch him without killing him to extract the information they need. Then, just as Shino started engaging with Fugaku in close combat, surprising him with his immense physical strength and speed while Minato was laying a formation to trap him, Mukai's eyes suddenly narrowed as a hint of a cruel smile appeared on his face as he quickly disappeared from his position and appeared in front of Fugaku to block Shino's path, causing the latter to stare at him smugly and say mockingly, "What are you doing? You want to tickle me again?" Then, Shino stared at his shredded body before he glanced at Mukai again haughtily. "What's Mukai planning?" was the thought on Minato's and Fugaku's head as they stared at Mukai's cruel and playful smile and his activated Byakugan, and then they saw him suddenly move quickly and stab Shino with his finger in multiple places, yet the latter didn't even bother to dodge and seemed to be unaffected by his attack as the smugness on his face grew bigger and said, "Are you done?" Fugaku and Minato frowned at this, but they could see that Mukai's smile only grew wider as well, and before long, to their surprise, Shino's smugness turned into a frown, and then that frown turned into absolute horror as his huge body started to grow thinner and thinner, losing all his previous muscles and size. "What's going on?" asked Fugaku, who could see through his Sharingan that Shino's chakra was moving erratically, and Minato too could feel it as he reappeared and stood beside the two of them to observe what was happening closely. After some time, Shino deflated like a balloon and turned into an old man with an emaciated body with his hair turning white and started falling off to the point that he appeared that he might die at any moment. So Fugaku quickly asked Mukai with a frown, "What did you do to him?" Minato too was interested in this conversation, so he listened closely while keeping an eye on what was happening to Shino's body as dark chakra kept leaking out of it. Mukai simply shrugged at Fugaku before he pointed at Shino and said, "I noticed with my Byakugan that he uses his dark chakra through certain channels in his body, So I simply blocked the tenketsu points it uses, which stopped its flow, resulting in a backlash causing him to turn into this current form. This is probably what happens to someone who's reliant on dark chakra when they are deprived from it. Hearing his explanation, Minato and Fugaku's eyes narrowed and they couldn't help but frown at such a dangerous double-edged power, especially since they both understood immediately the terrifying point behind this feature, as Fugaku said with a cold look in his eyes. So this means that the users of this chakra are required to keep acquiring more of it every time they start running out of it, otherwise they would end up like this. What a vicious cycle, muttered Minato with a frown as he could tell that the man in front of him did many evil deeds to acquire this dark chakra. To keep his form and even use it for battle despite his identity as a doctor. Well, we still have many things to figure out from this man. Shall we start? Said Mukai to Minato, and the latter nodded in understanding as he started walking to Shino, who was screaming in madness while looking at Mukai. What did you do to me? Where's my power? No, this can't be possible. Our power is unmatched. But Minato ignored all of his crazy talk as he put his hand on his shoulder and turned to Fugaku and Mukai, saying, "Meet me at the other cave we prepared." Minato actually considered the possibility that their trap might fail, so he prepared another location just in case that could counter this kind of variation. The two of them nodded as they watched Minato disappear in front of them using his flying thunder god jutsu before they too quickly disappeared, heading to the cave they prepared to interrogate Shino. Once there, they found the old and emaciated Shino tied to a pillar screaming all kinds of nonsense as Minato started putting custom seals all over his body to restrain him even more, since he had an idea now how this dark chakra worked. This was to prevent any other accidents from happening, accidents such as him taking his own life, leaving them with nothing to gain. And seeing that the two of them arrived, they finally started their interrogation, asking all kinds of questions: who he is, where did he get this power and learn how to control it, which hidden village or organization this guy belonged to, and so on. Yet every time they got no information from him as he kept staring at them with a disturbing crazed smile. But Mukai's next words finally broke that grin of his as he said, "From the way you seem to hate Konoha to the point that you said I will kill all of you Konoha bastards, and you even targeted Fugaku out of 3 of us, probably because of him being the Hokage. I can assume that this grudge isn't unfounded, and from the information we gathered, you are probably one of the remnants from the village hidden in the sky, correct?" Seeing the piercing eyes staring at him, Shino finally realized that the trio in front of him knew far more than he had imagined about his situation, and he finally couldn't keep his crazed act, especially when he heard Fugaku's next words. "One more thing you should keep in mind is that Tsunade the Sannin is already investigating the village you reside in. I'm sure someone as smart as you that could keep his identity hidden for such a long time wouldn't choose a village to live in so randomly, right?" Shino's face grew darker and darker, seeing that the situation was already going out of hand, and at this point they might end up discovering the remnants of their village that was buried near the village, and they might even find out their hideout that wasn't that far from there. "Oh, your face is changing, that's quite the good news for us. So are you going to start talking, or should we call an expert and extract this information from you forcefully?" said Fugaku coldly, to which Shino shot them one last look before he said, "Go to hell." And then to the trio's surprise, he actually took advantage of his neck not being tied hard enough, since Minato saw his emaciated body and didn't want to risk suffocating him. But they never expected that Shino would use this slight misjudgment from Minato to do a forceful movement, and he actually snapped his own neck in half with a dark smile on his face that sent a chill to the hearts of the trio. "No!" yelled Fugaku, trying to stop this, but it was too late, because soon enough, Shino stopped breathing and they couldn't detect any signs of life from his body even when using the Byakugan and the Sharingan. Meanwhile, earlier in the Land of Fire, Tsunade, who was blindly investigating the Land of Sky and if they had any remnants after hearing that they were related to the death of her grandpa, suddenly felt a device that Minato gave her vibrating. This is that communication device Minato gave me. What's going on?" muttered Tsunade before she injected her chakra into it, and she could hear a familiar voice coming from it. It was Fugaku's voice. "Tsunade, we found information about the Land of the Sky." Hearing this, Tsunade's eyes began to shine brightly as she quickly responded, "Tell me everything," and Fugaku obliged as he started telling her everything Mukai told them about Shino and Cloud Village. "A doctor. Cloud Village, huh?" muttered Tsunade with an unreadable look in her eyes as she started making her way towards Cloud Village. while Tsunade was making her way to Cloud Village to further investigate Shino's identity. Back at the cave where the monster trio were interrogating Shino previously, there were no more sounds as the three experienced ninjas kept looking at each other silently with their backs tingling with chills as they observed the lifeless body of Shino smiling at them with a crazed look in his eyes and a twisted smile on his face, a smile even more twisted than his own neck. Seeing that their only lead might be lost and their situation was getting more and more awkward, Minato decided to break the silence and ask the duo with him again, "Are you guys sure that he's dead?" Hearing this, Fugaku shook his head with a dark look in his eyes and responded, "I'm certain." Hearing his response, Minato turned to look at Mukai to see if he agrees, but he could see that the latter seemed to be fidgeting about something like a kid who did something wrong, and he appeared to be about to start biting his nails from the nervousness. So, curious, Minato couldn't help but ask him, "Mukai, is everything okay?" Seeing that Minato was addressing him directly, Mukai finally woke up from his daze and responded with a forced smile. Bakurio said to bring him back alive and appeared to have some plans for him. "I need to report this to him." Seeing the pitying looks Fugaku and Minato were casting him, Mukai grew more and more nervous, but he steeled his resolve and took out his communication device, and started injecting chakra into it to call Bakurio. After some vibration, the device suddenly stopped as a young voice that everyone in the cave clearly recognized drifted from it and asked calmly, "Mukai, why are you calling right now? Did you already catch that guy?" Hearing Bakurio going straight to the point, Mukai knew that he had no way to avoid this mess, so he directly started recounting what happened after letting out a sigh about that. After finishing his explanation, Bakurio grew silent for a while before he said coldly, "Wait for me there," and quickly hang up the communication device. "TCH, this guy is really problematic even after his death," muttered Mukai while looking at Shino's dead corpse and felt tempted to twist his neck even further. Meanwhile, on the other end of the call, Bakurio could be seen staring coldly at the air deep in thought before he decided to exit Orochimaru's library and went to find Kurama, who was currently toying around with Kimimaro, to pass some time. And after he got his ride, they quickly started heading towards the location of the monster trio in a terrifying speed. Somewhere else, in the east of the Land of Fire, Tsunade had just arrived to Cloud Village. To her surprise, she found that it wasn't that easy to access for normal people, and she had to go through many vegetations and rivers before she arrived to her location. And now in front of her stood a huge wall made from brick stones, and after making her way to the entrance of the village, she was surprised by how ancient its architecture appeared to be, completely different from the villages she's used to visit. The most surprising thing she found out is that the village was built on top of a hill, so after crossing the entrance, which was simply an opening in the stone wall, Tsunade encountered a plaza, and to its right were stairs made of stones as well. Those stairs led to higher grounds, and there were many levels where the houses were built, and at the very top of the hill, she could see a bigger than normal house there whom she guessed belonged to the village chief. So, under the gazes of the villagers looking at her curiously, Tsunade started making her way up the stairs to get the information she needs. However, before she could even get to the house, some children who were playing around couldn't help but approach this blonde stranger curiously and ask, "Big sister, where are you from?" Tsunade looked down at the kid that asked her this question, and she noticed that it was a little girl with long black hair, and around her were two other girls, one of which had short black hair and appeared to be slightly younger than the first one, while the other one had reddish-brown hair and thick eyebrows as well as blue eyes. However, Tsunade noticed that her skin appeared slightly sickly, and from her expertise she deduced that this girl was probably ill for a long time and started healing just recently, making her think that she might be related to that Dr. Shino. So, she calmly looked at them and replied, "I'm from the village hidden in the leaves. I came here looking for a doctor called Shino to ask him for help. Do you guys have any idea where I can find him?" Tsunade noticed that the eyes of the three girls started shining when they heard that she was a ninja, but they turned into an even stranger light at the mention of the Dr. Shino, especially the sickly girl, as her eyes appeared to contain a glint close to idolization as they replied, "Dr. Shino went out of the village to gather some medical herbs to treat the son of the village chief. He might not be back for a while, big sister. No, he will never be back," thought Tsunade inwardly coldly before she asked them again with a friendly smile hiding the darkness in her heart, "Can you guys tell me more about him?" I heard he's an amazing doctor. The black-haired girls immediately turned their attention to the red-haired one as if feeling that she could describe it best, and that girl indeed immediately started praising the doctor and telling Tsunade about his great kindness of curing her from her strange illness that caused her to be shunned by the villagers, as well as how he spent sleepless nights by her bed until she could stand back up on her own. And all the time, Tsunade could see the genuine gratitude in the girl's eyes, and she couldn't help but think, no wonder it was so hard to find this man. Probably if not for Bakuria we would have never figured out the existence of such a masterful spy until it's too late. Tsunade felt grateful that they already captured such a dangerous man, but at the same time, she couldn't help but feel conflicted at the duality of that man's behavior, such a show of pure kindness, yet also capable of showing pure cruelty. After contemplating internally for a while and hearing the full sad story of this red-haired girl, she got to know the name of Izumaru. She thanked them and made her way back up to the house of the village chief, and to her surprise, he appeared to be waiting for her, and she guessed that someone probably informed him while she was gathering information from the kids. The village chief was an old man that appeared to be in his 60s with long white hair and a slightly hunched back and sleep eyes. However, the moment his eyes landed on Tsunade's figure and seeing the trademark diamond seal on her forehead, they immediately opened up to their full extent, and he shivered slightly as he said, "What do we owe the honor for your visit, Lady Tsunade?" Tsunade was surprised slightly by this man knowing her identity, but she simply shrugged it off, thinking that her reputation was going to make things easier for her when she starts her investigation. Tsunade's interrogation of the chief of the Cloud Village went without a hitch, and she found that most of what the kids told her earlier was true, and she got a better understanding of the illness that plagues that kid Amaru, and she couldn't help but be impressed by the skills of this doctor despite her anger towards him. She also asked the village chief about the weird architecture and layout of this village, and it was explained to her that they lived near an old ruin and the inhabitants of the village decided to mimic their style of building, which greatly attracted her attention, and she decided to give it a visit after she was done here. But before that, she noticed the suspicious look of the village chief regarding her questioning, and indeed, he couldn't hold back anymore and he asked her directly, "Lady Tsunade, did Dr. Shino do anything wrong?" Tsunade could clearly see the worry in his eyes, and it didn't seem to be directed at Shino but for something else, and at this point she remembered what one of the kids told her regarding why Shino wasn't here, so he's worried about his son, huh? Arg. Tsunade could hear the faint groans of someone clearly in pain in another room in the house, and after giving it a glance, she turned to the village chief and said, "I heard your son was ill. Let me check his condition." Of course, she wasn't going to tell him top secret information related to the death of a Hokage, the strongest one at that, so the best she could do was to directly heal his son to appease his worry. This is the least she could do to pay him back for his cooperation. Really? I would be eternally grateful if you can help him, replied the old village chief with some light returning to his despairing eyes. After all, the woman in front of him was known for being the best medical ninja. So, without hesitation, he led her to the room where his son was, and the moment Tsunade laid her eyes on him she couldn't help but wrinkle her brows. In front of her was laying a middle-aged man. His face appeared to be full of pain as sweat fell continuously from it, yet he didn't appear to be conscious, so Tsunade stepped forward and started checking his condition before turning toward his father and asking questions like, "When did this start? Did he lose consciousness immediately or did it take a while?" And so on. After she gathered enough information, her frown deepened even further, and the village chief couldn't help but ask her worriedly, "Lady Tsunade, Dr. Shino said that this is a very rare illness. Do you think it's curable?" He was still clinging to the hope that Shino gave him that there's a chance in curing his son's illness, but from the look on Tsunade's face, he started to lose that hope too. However, what Tsunade said next left him in shock, as she simply smirked coldly and said, "Illness. Your son is clearly poisoned." The village chief felt a bomb exploding in his head before his shocked eyes narrowed dangerously. He was an experienced man, and he quickly started connecting the dots between Tsunade's presence here and her weird interest in a supposedly kind doctor, but all of this was overshadowed by his worry for his son as he asked her, "See, can you treat Satoshi?" Tsunade observed the behavior of this village chief before. She silently nodded. Of course, she can. After all, she recognized this poison as something used by the people of the village hidden in the sky during their invasion of the Land of Fire. At that time, countless poison kunai were thrown at Konoha's ninja from the sky and they were forced to find a cure. This poison also made Konoha lose many chances at capturing their ninja for questioning because they would use their advanced tools to inject it into their bodies to take their lives in the case they find themselves about to be captured. After they researched it, they found out that this poison is extremely deadly in high dosages, but in low dosages, it results in the current situation of the son of the village chief Satoshi, putting the affected person into a coma-like state and causing them immense pain. So, the moment she saw this poison, it further confirmed her suspicions regarding Shino's connection to the village hidden in the sky. Or at least its remains. After explaining to the village chief how to treat this poison, she quickly left and made her way to the home where Shino stays, but she found nothing there. So, she made her way to the ancient ruins near the village hoping she could find more clues there. Meanwhile, inside a cave, the trio consisting of Minato, Mukai, and Fugaku suddenly started hearing the sound of explosions coming from the distance, and they couldn't help but look at each other seriously since they could tell that something dangerous was approaching. However, after Mukai did a quick investigation with his Byakugan, his serious expression immediately went back to his laid-back look before telling the other two, "That troublesome kid and his rider here, TCH, Minato and Fugaku could see the clear jealousy in his eyes and they couldn't help but show a faint smile, and before long they felt something stop in front of the entrance of the cave before it entered, and soon after they could hear the echo of footsteps before the figure of a boy in an orange fox appeared in front of them. The kid of course was Bakurio and he immediately shot Mukai a cold look causing the latter to shift slightly behind Minato while waving his hand at him. "Yo, Bakurio. You came quick." Bakurio simply ignored him before he turned his attention to Minato and Fugaku and shot them a faint smile as he said, "It's been a while huh?" Minato and Fugaku exchanged greetings with him before they quickly turned their attention to Shino since this wasn't the time for a reunion. "What do you think, Bakurio?" asked Fugaku since he felt Bakurio had an idea in mind if he asked them to wait for him before they take any further actions. "I'm going to try something," replied Bakurio as he approached Shino and confirmed first with his 3-tomo Sharingan that there were no traces of life in Shino's body before he suddenly closed his eyes and started concentrating. The other three didn't know what he was doing but they didn't disturb him and simply watched calmly. However, they suddenly saw Bakurio open his eyes with a smirk on his face and a playful look in his eyes as he said, well, I never thought someone could be capable of such a thing, this is amazing." The trio had questioning looks as they looked at Bakurio not understanding what he was talking about, and Mukai wasn't one to overthink things when he could directly ask, "What are you talking about?" Minato and Fugaku as well were attracted by his comment but they simply saw Bakurio's smirk widen as he pointed at Shino's dead body and said, "This guy is alive, and whatever jutsu he's using to fake his death can actually hide even from the visual abilities of the Byakugan, how could this be anything less than amazing?" The trio's eyes widened in surprise and they couldn't help but check again with their different abilities only to come to their first conclusion that he was dead. This was a weird phenomenon, because despite all the medical knowledge Bakurio learned from Tsunade and Orochimaru, he still couldn't find any traces of life in this man's body. But he used something else, something that couldn't be tricked, and that is his Yomi no Kuni's passive ability, and despite its incredible control and sensitivity towards death, he couldn't sense any death from this dead body in front of him, making him amazed at such amazing technique that could even trick both the Sharingan and Byakugan. In fact, at first he was even ready to use Yomi no Kuni and summon this doctor's soul, but now it didn't seem to be necessary. "Are you sure?" asked Minato, and Bakurio could see the clear trust in his eyes towards him despite the question and he replied with a nod before he started poking Shino's half-bald head with his finger while saying, "Oi, for how long are you going to keep pretending to be dead?" "Impossible," was all Shino could think hearing the voice of the kid that could see through his technique. "Who's this kid?" While the trio were staring suspiciously at the dead body of the dangerous doctor they caught. Its open eyes that had no light in them suddenly twitched as life came back to them and dark energy started emanating from the broken neck, fixing it immediately and allowing Shino to examine the person that could see through his disguise. To his surprise, just as the voice indicated, it was only a kid, and after examining him carefully, he remembered a certain piece of information he gathered while collecting information in Konoha, information about a certain genius appearing in the Uchiha clan. "So this is Just as Shino was lost in thought, Bakurio smirked at him and said, "Oh, how come you stopped playing dead?" Meanwhile, the trio were startled by this outcome and quickly put their guard up again as they looked at the doctor coming back to life out of nowhere. TCH, we were almost tricked. Mukai clicked his tongue while Minato and Fugaku simply observed coldly. Shino shot Bakurio a frown remembering what he felt just moments ago, a terror that rose from the deepest part of his soul telling him that he was going to experience a fate worse than death if he didn't wake up right away. That's why he didn't think the kid was simply bluffing. Of course, that feeling was intentionally made by Bakurio with some simple emotional manipulation. It's not good to ignore someone when they are talking to you. Sigh. So old yet have no manners, said Bakurio in a mocking tone that finally got a reaction from Shino as he gritted his teeth and said, "What do you want?" Bakurio put on a pondering look before he replied, Let's try asking something simple. How did you fake your own death?" Many thoughts flashed through Shino's eyes, and Bakurio quickly cut him off with a cold look. "You lie. You die. Believe me, I have many ways to find the information I want." Shino could clearly tell thanks to his great experience, the little monster in front of him wasn't lying, so he let out a long sigh and his primary desire turned into preservation of his village. It's thanks to the body revival jutsu. This jutsu takes advantage of the dark chakra and allows the user to fake his death. It's also the reason I could push my body to a superhuman level, as it also grants great regenerative abilities. Oh, Bakurio shot him a playful smirk before he said to the trio beside him, "Tempting, isn't it, guys?" They were smart enough and didn't need his reminder as Mukai turned to him with a similar smirk as he said, "Indeed, I wonder why this hostage would go to such great length to explain that this jutsu has other uses." Shit. They could easily tell, thought Shino, distressed that his plan in showing how valuable his knowledge was might not work as he's intending, and that was confirmed when he heard the kid say, "Are you guys interested in something that could be nullified by a Byakugan or Sharingan user? Seems pretty useless to me." Bakurio was hinting at the fact that Mukai can easily disable Shino at his peak form thanks to his Byakugan and hitting his Tenketsu, and from what they told him about their fight, he concluded that the Sharingan could do the same, although with less precision. So right now, he was purposefully undervaluing Shino's worth to get him to spill more information. After all, he wasn't sure if they could use mind-related jutsu to get the information they wanted. HMPH, Shino snorted at this before he said, "It can also increase the lifespan of its user." Bakurio looked at him thinking, well, this is interesting. It seems this is why it's so attractive to these people, huh? Well, we can talk about that later. Now I want to ask you this. What do you know about the death of the first Hokage? Bakurio's eyes had a terrifying glint as this was also something that concerns his life. Shino seemed surprised by this before his eyes suddenly dimmed and he started to hysterically laugh to the dismay of the people present before he said with a mocking grin, "Well, your great Hokage bit more than he can chew, duh." Before he could finish his talk, Bakurio smashed the wall of the cave right beside his head, causing it to cave in, showing the people present what could have happened to Shino before he said, "Please elaborate more. I'm all ears," and his murderous aura kept getting higher and higher, suffocating Shino, who was its main target, until a hand landed on Bakurio's shoulder, calming him down slightly. Bakurio nodded at Minato before turning back to Shino, who was sweating bullets and being understanding what kind of monsters they provoked. A monster that had no mercy in his eyes towards him or his village, so he said, I will tell you, but with one condition." "Sure. You can ask of anything as long as it doesn't concern the village hidden in the sky," said Bakurio with a dark smile, making Shino shiver slightly before he gained back his calm. "I can't let these people discover the village and disrupt our plans. I'm the only survivor of the village, so of course, my request isn't about that." Shino let out a remorseful sigh before he said, "Please just make sure that the little kid I've been taken care of, Amaru, would be cured of the rest of her illness. I'm sure Konoha has the capabilities to do this much. Hopefully this will buy us some time and the other people will notice my absence and lay low for a while," thought Shino. "Oh, playing the emotional card won't work here, buddy," thought Bakurio before he said, "Sure, that's not a problem. Now answer my previous question." Shino let out a sigh and was about to speak, but he was suddenly interrupted as Bakurio said, "And I can tell if you lie or not. Just a friendly reminder." Shino's mouth twitched slightly before he decided to tell them the truth. "Darkness is everywhere. we simply found the way to manipulate it. As for Hashirama Senju, the greatest ninja of his time, I'm not sure how he died exactly. All I know from our ancestors is that he visited a forbidden ground that only the hosts of Zero Tail could find. The rest you probably know better than I do since he died in Konoha, Zero Tail huh? Many conjectures started racing through Bakurio's head. He knew what Shino said was true, and the rest of the people with him could also tell from his reaction, but Minato's eyes narrowed slightly before he said, "You said you found the way to manipulate it, how exactly?" Shino's face had no reaction to what Minato said, but Bakurio could feel that his heart was in turmoil and refocused on the conversation. Of course, we used the Zero Tail as a converter. It can absorb negative emotions and transform them into dark chakra, and with time, a select few of us also mastered how to do the same. However, we could never reach the efficiency of the Zero Tail, said Shino calmly. At this, Minato simply smiled and said, "I see. Well then, please enlighten us how this Zero Tail came to be. It seems like I've been ignoring the talent of the people around me huh?" Bakurio shot an appreciative look at Minato as he remembered that, while he has a system to rely on, the people around him reached the peak of this world purely thanks to their own talents, so they should never be underestimated. After coming to this realization, the ego he started to grow started to shrink slightly, and as he turned to look at Shino, his eyes widened in surprise because just when this doctor opened his mouth and decided to answer, his face suddenly went stiff and his dim eyes dimmed even further. The four of them immediately used their investigative abilities to understand what was happening, but the only thing they saw was some kind of black smoke emerging inside of Shino's heart before dark blood started coming out of his mouth with a terrified look on his eyes and his body twitching constantly until he finally went limp. What the hell just happened? The people present exchanged startled looks because although they couldn't tell what happened to Shino, they all felt something else. A very dark presence gazed at them before it disappeared, leaving an ominous feeling in their hearts. The cave went silent for a while with everyone lost in their own thoughts until Fugaku's communication device started ringing, and soon after, Tsunade's voice sounded with a hint of shock still there in her tone as she said, "I just ended my investigation of Cloud Village." Picking up on her weird tone, Fugaku quickly asked, "What did you find out?" With everyone's focus on this conversation, Tsunade went silent for a second before she said, I think I found the village hidden in the sky." "What?" Fugaku was shocked, and even the rest were also startled, so he quickly wanted clarification. "Please explain further." At this point, Minato shot Bakurio a look and he noticed a frown on his face. Clearly this wasn't in his expectations, which made him worried slightly as they heard Tsunade's voice again. "Here's what happened." Tsunade started talking about her experience in Cloud Village and its weird architecture, so she decided to investigate the ruins it was inspired from. And look and behold, she found remains of buildings that didn't look like anything built in the Land of Fire, and after some more digging and investigation, to her astonishment, she discovered that those few buildings she saw were just the tip of the iceberg, and a whole lot more were buried underground, or to be precise, concealed. And she believed that they were the flying land that was once the village hidden in the sky. "Do you think it could have been done by one person?" asked Mukai, suddenly startling Tsunade since she didn't know that there were more people here. "Don't worry, it's only Minato and Bakurio, as well as Mukai," Fugaku explained so that she continues her explanation freely. "Bakurio and Minato are also there," thought Tsunade inwardly before she continued. "Yes, I don't think it's possible for him to do it on his own because the scale is simply too big, and to hide such a huge mass before we discover it means that it was done through the effort of many ninjas. Sure enough, there are still many ninjas from the village hidden in the sky lurking around, but why's Bakurio still frowning? Is it because of the way Shino died?" thought Minato as an uneasy feeling started to grow in his heart when he remembered the eerie presence he felt. Fugaku's eyes instantly grew cold as he said, "There's no way they would hide too far away from their village. There's a high chance that they could be hiding in one of the small islands near the east coast of the Land of Fire. I will send a team to investigate it as soon as possible." Tsunade also replied with a similarly cold voice as she added her opinion. "I agree, but those people were always very advanced in their technology, so we should also investigate the sea in itself just in case." Tsunade saw the might of these people with her own eyes during the Second Ninja War, and she knew that given such a long time has passed, it's impossible for them not to have made advancements in their technology. "Okay, I will send a team to join you and you can continue the investigation with them, said Fugaku, and after receiving a positive reply from Tsunade, he shut off the communication. You guys should go back to Konoha and let me know if there's any news of importance, said Bakurio as he prepared to leave and hasten his research with Orochimaru. But before he could, Minato suddenly stood in his path and asked with a concerned look on his face, Bakurio-kun, is everything okay? This caught the attention of the rest and Bakurio couldn't help but let out a sigh, thinking it was hard to hide his emotions with Minato around, but he knew the guy was simply concerned about his well-being, so he smiled at him to ease his worries before he said, we need to get stronger. I don't think we will find our answers with these people that could only remain hidden and cowering in fear. Fugaku narrowed his eyes at this as he asked, what do you mean? Looking at him, Bakurio simply shrugged and said, it's clear as day that they are disposable pawns someone's using, and a similar situation to Shino's would occur again if wanted to investigate the Zero Tails origin, and even if we find who's behind all of this, I don't think we stand a chance against him since even Hashirama failed. So, for the time being, you guys should focus on getting stronger. After all, this guy's soul was directly erased in an instant, thought Bakurio, but he left it unsaid. Once Bakurio was finished with what he said, he turned to Mukai and said, train the kids for a while, I will call you if I need you, before he directly jumped on the back of Kurama and disappeared, leaving the trio sighing. This brat is getting more and more annoying, said Mukai with clear annoyance in his voice, although it wasn't clear what it was directed at before he nodded at the other two and disappeared back to Konoha, leaving them to discuss the next plans. After he got some distance from the trio, Kurama couldn't help but stop and growl at Bakurio as the frown on the latter's face returned and deepened before he activated his Mangekyo Sharingan and started using Jikaninki to calm his wild emotions filled with negativity. This was something triggered after the death of Shino, as he felt the dark orb in his heart acting up and he almost lost control and attacked his friends. It seems this thing left no choice for Hashirama. This is why he decided to face it directly. But at least I have my Jikaninki, although at this rate it won't last for long before I go blind if I don't find a solution for it. Letting out a long sigh, Bakurio concluded what his next goal would be before he turned to the anxious Kurama that was looking at him worriedly before he patted his head and said, I'm fine now, don't worry. Kurama was the only one that could feel the negative emotions that were raging through Bakurio's heart just moments ago thanks to his innate ability, but after seeing that Bakurio was able to keep them under control, he let out a sigh and said with his deep voice, Kid, you scared me for a second there. Bakurio smiled at him warmly before he stared at the distance and his smile became fiendish as he said, Don't worry. This won't happen again, buddy. HMPH. Who's your buddy? Snorted Kurama before they made their way back to Orochimaru's base, and the first thing Bakurio did was to check his status and he noticed that he had a debuff that said Seed of Darkness, active state. This seed allows its caster to create and enhance the negative emotions on its host's body, and if it surpasses a certain threshold, the host will become a puppet for the caster. Current effect 10%. Bakurio looked at this with a frown because he was only able to bring it down to this degree thanks to his Mangekyo Sharingan, so after settling down, he checked the level of his eye powers and how much battery he had after absorbing nature energy 10.58%. Eye of Insight level 65, Eye of Hypnotism level 67, Yomi no Kuni level 41, Jikaninki level 34, Susanoo level 31. This should be enough for some leveling, thought Bakurio before he settled on his training room in Orochimaru's base and made a new save point and started to focus all of his attention on leveling his Jikaninki by using its full power to destroy the Seed of Darkness in his heart that grew slightly bigger than the last time he saw it during the war. Then he would go back in time and keep on doing this over and over again until his system's energy reserves reaches 5%, at which point he would stop and starts refueling them with both his chakra and nature's chakra, which enhanced his nature's mastery in the process. This went on for a whole week, during which Konoha's investigations were advancing, but unfortunately at a slow rate, because if there's one thing Konoha lacked, it's elite water-style users. However, after 1 week, Bakurio's effort finally paid off, as his Jikaninki finally reached level 100, but just when he thought he was going to be able to level it beyond level 100, something he never experienced happened to him. A quest appeared out of nowhere. Skill Advancement Quest. Kill and absorb a creature that can manipulate emotions. Reward. Jikaninki hi Jikaninki, seeing this, Bakurio smirked coldly, especially since he knew that his target was waiting for him inside a scroll in Konoha, not to mention that he also got a passive skill from this. Reinforced Heart grants the user a huge resistance towards emotional attacks. This passive alone allowed him to deal with the Seed of Darkness to the point that its effect was reduced all the way to 0%. As for his Jikaninki, he could now use it to easily detect and destroy the Seed of Darkness in his heart, as well as sense if the emotions of someone near him are controlled or affected by something, making it a great way to detect manipulated people, as well as free them from its control. During the time Bakurio was training his eye powers, mainly Jikaninki, for now to deal with the Seed of Darkness, his shadow clones kept training and studying the various jutsu Orochimaru had in his library. Meanwhile, the squad of elite Anbu Konoha sent led by Tsunade herself finally found some clues about the location of where the remaining forces of the village hidden in the sky were hiding. It was a small island east of the Land of Fire. To the east of the Land of Fire, there's the small Land of Whirlpools where the Uzumaki clan used to reside. This place was named this way because the sea that surrounded it was filled with weird whirlpools that requires great navigation skills for ships to traverse them, making it a naturally protected hideout. The place is also filled with small islands, so the village hidden in the sky took advantage of this location to set up its bases. Tsunade's squad discovered that these ninjas took it a step further and only had very few well-hidden sentries to keep a lookout on the situation on the surface of the island. As for the rest of their forces, they were all hiding in a cave that can only be accessed from an opening that was hundreds of meters below the water surface. This made it very hard to find them, but not impossible with the variety of skills and bloodlines the ninjas of Konoha had in their arsenal. However, they still didn't make any moves yet, waiting for reinforcement to arrive, and it didn't take long to come as Hiruzen brought with him a squad of 10 Jonin and a 100 elite Chunin that had some mastery with water style, and once they made sure they surrounded the island from all directions to hinder any possible escape. Tsunade finally made her move and started infiltrating the island with the Anbu squad that had a certain Kakashi as well as Shisui and Itachi in their ranks. However, they soon encountered a huge surprise as the expected houses weren't found. Instead, they found a huge military base and a factory waiting for them with all kinds of scientists doing experiments on metallic devices. Some looked like wings, others looked like cannons, and some were huge ships which caught Tsunade and the rest off guard for a moment before they immediately took action and started neutralizing the people from the village hidden in the sky silently without alerting the rest, while Kakashi signaled to one of the Anbu to go back and report their findings to Hiruzen, which he immediately did. Back at the surface, Hiruzen received the news about the base and immediately frowned. "Don't tell me, this is just one of their hideouts." With this conclusion, he immediately gave orders for his people to enhance their focus in case someone tries to escape, or signaled to the rest of their enemies what was happening. But just as he was giving his orders, a huge explosion that shook the sea sounded from the bottom of the island he was observing, and huge waves like that of a tsunami started traveling in all directions, making Hiruzen's face turn pale instantly before he screamed, "Tsunade!" The rest of the ninja beside him had similar expressions on their faces until one of the Jonin approached him and asked, "Lord Hiruzen, what should we do?" Hearing him, Hiruzen was brought out of the shock of possibly losing one of his dear students and some of the greatest talents in Konoha, and immediately ordered, "Send people to search for them immediately and prepare a squad of medical nin to stay at the ready." "Yes, sir," said the Jonin before he disappeared to follow his orders, leaving Hiruzen to mutter to himself, "What kind of craziness is this? They would even kill their own people just like that." Meanwhile, inside the factory, a few seconds before the explosion happened, Tsunade and the rest found it weird how their operation was going smoothly, in fact too smooth. And they noticed how the workers appeared almost emotionless even after being immobilized and captured by the Anbu or even killed, which made them feel that something wasn't right. So, at the last minute, Tsunade ordered a retreat and to continue the exploration with shadow clones only, even if it lowers their efficiency, and the rest of the Anbu immediately executed. However, not before bringing with them 2 of their captives. However, just as they reached the entrance of the cave, they all felt a hand gripping their hearts and they sensed their shadow clones dissipating one after the other, and in an instant, they all received the information of what happened to them, so without any hesitation, they jumped out of the cave while deploying their best defensive jutsu. Water walls, earth walls, wind walls, they used everything they could, but it wasn't enough to hold back the huge explosion that was weakened by their shadow clones. And at the last second, just when Itachi and Shisui were about to summon their Susanoo for additional protection, Tsunade bit her thumb and summoned Katsuyu, her legendary huge slug, which without hesitation swallowed them in its stomach before the smoke of her summoning even dissipated as a moan of pain escaped her mouth and the explosion engulfed her huge body. Fortunately for them, they were underwater, and as the body of the slug was being pushed away by the power of the explosion, the damage it was receiving lessened quite a bit thanks to the protection of the water. However, this still ended up with Katsuyu suffering serious injuries. Feeling that she was about to dissipate, she instantly spat the ninjas in her mouth out before dissipating under their thankful eyes and Tsunade's worried look. However, Kakashi's hand soon landed on her shoulder, reminding her that not everyone had a strong enough body to withstand the pressure underwater for a long time, and realizing this, she shot a look at young Itachi, who was forced to cast a water bubble to protect himself from the pressure but was still struggling with the lack of oxygen, so she immediately nodded and led them to the surface where they found some ninjas searching for them. Ellipsis. After this small dance with death, Hiruzen and Tsunade decided to not underestimate the cruelty of their enemy anymore, as well as their technology, since they were clearly aware of their arrival, and yet even someone as experienced as Tsunade didn't notice how they were discovered at all. However, they didn't come out of this without anything, as they still had with them the two captives they got, which still seemed to be in some sort of trance and would only attack them the moment they woke them up, leaving them no choice but to use forceful methods to check their memories, from which they discovered the location of other bases which they attacked using shadow clones or directly used Earth-style jutsu to make them collapse on those people. However, every time the bases would end up exploding rather than surrendering, and they never any information regarding the Zero Tails, as if someone wiped it out intentionally. This continued for 3 whole days before they concluded that there were no survivors, and they retreated back to Konoha with heavy hearts, since this incident left a weird taste in their mouths as if they were fighting puppets. As the situation in Konoha was going back to normal, Bakurio was still cultivating his Ai's abilities. He felt it could have been faster if his Uchiha bloodline was stronger. Unfortunately, it was only 50% at this point. However, his efforts were still effective, and after another week of training, he was able to raise Yomi no Kuni all the way to level 100, granting him the passive skill. Rebirth from the Ashes grants the user one more chance in life after death. Cooldown. 1 year, a broken ability which, although had a long cooldown of 1 year, was still a life-saving trump card that would be the dream of any person. Plus, unlike other people, he can always level it up. So, with another trump card in hand, and far more enhanced abilities, Bakurio decided to head to Konoha to deal with the troublesome beast called Zero Tail and further increase his power to deal with the darkness that's targeting him, while Orochimaru and Kabuto kept working on his bloodline experiment. Halting his plans to further master the rest of the sage styles, Bakurio made his way to Konoha, which already returned back to normal after the slight turmoil with the village hidden in the sky, and currently, they were unearthing their huge fortress that was hidden beside Cloud Village to investigate their technology and maybe replicate it in the future. Bakurio decided to go visit Naruto and Sasuke first, since he missed those two kids he didn't meet for months, so the moment he set foot in the village through its huge entrance, Bakurio immediately caught the scent of the two brats, bringing a smile to his face as he started making his way towards them. After a few minutes of walking and enjoying the scenery of the village, Bakurio found his nose taking him towards the civilian school. Unlike the Ninja Academy, which works to train those who wish to become ninja, this school is something all kids attend when they are 6, simply to learn how to read and write and learn some simple math. Then at the age of 7, they could attend the Ninja Academy to further their studies and also starts learning the way of the ninja. And currently, the students appeared to be on a break, and Bakurio immediately found his targets. Sasuke was being surrounded by admiring gazes from the girls with an annoyed look on his face as he ate his lunch. Clearly, people were attracted by his good looks and intelligence, as they already started calling him a genius. Not to mention, being the youngest son of the Hokage made his status even more prominent for these civilian kids and even those who belonged to ninja clans. 2 girls Bakurio recognized that were clinging to him were a pink-haired girl and a blonde one, and they both seemed to be fighting for Sasuke's attention. And seeing them, Bakurio immediately turned around and went to Naruto, since he didn't want to be infected by their stupidity, especially Sakura. After he turned his attention from Sasuke, he locked into Naruto's position and he noticed that he was standing along a sleepy-eyed kid with a lazy look on his face and a kid wearing a hoodie with and had some red markings on his cheeks as well as another chubby one who was eating chips. You already made friends, huh? Bakurio had a kind smile on his face seeing these small kids walking a different path in their life. As for why he was sure of this. Simple, they were both carrying his short swords on their hips making them stand out of place compared to the rest of the kids. Meanwhile, during all of this, Bakurio was standing near the entrance of the school and yet no one seemed to notice him, and they would simply pass by him, so taking advantage of his stealth, he made his way to Naruto's back and heard him say to Kiba, "TCH, sooner or later I will knock that smug look out of Sasuke's face." Shikamaru shot a lazy look at the recent bulge on top of Naruto's head caused by Sasuke and decided not to respond while Kiba directly mocked him with a smirk. "Are you crazy? That guy already awakened his Sharingan. There's no way you can beat him nor anyone our age." Kiba's face was full of confidence as he also tried and failed many times. "We'll see," said Naruto before he snorted and caressed his short sword slightly when suddenly he felt a breath near his ear before someone said, "Boo! Ah!" All four of the kids were alarmed by Naruto's scream and Naruto couldn't help but jump in the air like a cat before he turned around and saw a familiar face staring at him with a smile. "What did I teach you about letting your guard down?" This scream not only alarmed Naruto but also the rest of the kids in the courtyard and it also attracted Sasuke's attention who had an excited look on his face when he saw the cause of this commotion prompting one of the girls surrounding him to ask with a curious face, "Sasuke-kun, who's that black-haired kid?" Bakurio was wearing a black outfit and a black cape that covered all of his body which contrasted with his creamy white skin. All of these were items he received from killing monsters during his time training with Jiraiya and enhanced his attributes greatly. Meanwhile, the girls around Sasuke could only hear him mutter, "He's finally back." Before his eyes transformed into his two-tomo Sharingan and he drew his sword out and started rushing at Bakurio at his fastest speed alarming the girls who started screaming, "Sasuke-kun." Naruto was the same but before attacking, he first used the Shadow Clone Jutsu creating 3 clones and drew out his short sword and attacked Bakurio immediately from every possible direction. "What's going on? Is this kid an enemy?" mumbled Shikamaru to Choji beside him but he only received a worried look as the chubby kid replied, "I don't know, TCH we need to call the adults or someone might get her." Before Shikamaru could continue his sentence, he heard puff 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 sounding as all of Naruto's shadow clones dissipated before that unknown kid dodged the short sword and disarmed it from Naruto's hand and used it to block Sasuke who just arrived before kicking him away at the same time. However, this time, Sasuke managed to dodge the sudden kick barely making Bakurio open his mouth slightly in delight. It seems this kid is progressing pretty well in learning how to use his Sharingan. Not bad. Naruto didn't leave Bakurio too much time to think as he attacked from the back and to the surprise of everyone, the two kids that always argued and fought each other were working seamlessly against the unknown kid that suddenly appeared. However, at this point, the rest of the people finally woke up from their shock and those from ninja families decided to help Naruto and Sasuke. "Damn, I don't feel good about this," muttered Shikamaru before he suddenly interlocked his hands and his shadow started moving silently approaching Bakurio's until it touched it. "Now attack him," yelled the normally lazy Shikamaru only to get an amused look from Bakurio that sent chills down his spine as he suddenly felt himself flying through the air before he slammed into Kiba who was charging recklessly at Bakurio. Ite, what the hell was that? Am I dreaming? Did he just manifest my own shadow and used it to whip me around? Muttered Shikamaru in shock before he realized that he was sitting on top of Kiba. So he quickly stood up and helped him up too only to hear a whisper in his ears. "Maybe your father can bind me for a while, but you still have a long way to go kiddo." Shikamaru let out a helpless sigh. After all, Bakurio has the shadow bloodline. You can't expect to play with shadows against him. After feeling like he had his fun and understanding the extent of the power of these kids, Bakurio finally decided to wrap things up, especially since he noticed that Sasuke was about to use a fireball jutsu and he didn't want to go too far so he immediately appeared in front of him and tapped his head slightly causing the latter to wince in pain and hold it with a cute pout while saying, "That hurts? Well, you shouldn't have tried to use that. You might hurt the kids, said Bakurio before calmly tilting his head, avoiding a punch Naruto aimed at the back of his head, thinking it was a blind sport, with a smug look on his face before he head-butted him, leaving him wincing in pain with a pout just like Sasuke. Don't harm Sasuke-kun. Don't harm Naruto. Two scared voices rushed to stand between Bakurio and the kids. It was surprisingly Choji and Sakura, and other kids followed after them, bringing a smirk to Bakurio's face as he flicked their foreheads slightly, surprising the two as he said with a smile, "Why would I hurt them? They are my little brothers, eehhhhhh." All the kids had shocked looks on their faces while Naruto and Sasuke had bashful smiles, and while this was going on, Bakurio shot a look at a Jonin that was keeping tabs on what was going on, and the latter responded with a nod before he disappeared, while inside he was wondering, this little monster actually discovered me so easily. Since the Danzo incident, most high-level ninjas began recognizing Bakurio, so it wasn't a surprise that the ninja responsible for protecting the future prospects of the village as well as the children of the various big clans would recognize him. Meanwhile, the kids kept chatting and whispering about the kid that had just defeated both Naruto and Sasuke, who were known as the strongest talents. Not to mention he did that while they received the help of many other kids, which left them baffled until they remembered the stories the two brats always told. But hearing about something and seeing it in person is two completely different concepts. "Bakurio, when did you come back?" asked Naruto with a grin while rubbing his head. Clearly the excitement was overpowering the pain. Bakurio smiled slightly and said, "I just got back and came right away to see you too. I will be staying in the village for a while so we can talk later, okay?" Sasuke and Naruto pouted slightly when they saw that he had other business to attend to, but they were relieved when they heard that he will be staying for a while, so Sasuke said, "Let's have another rematch later." "Sure," replied Bakurio, only to hear Naruto saying, "I want to have some ramen instead," which made him chuckle before rubbing their heads slightly, healing their bumps before disappearing towards the direction of the Uchiha compound to meet the rest of his friends. Kurama was already waiting for him there. And the moment he left, the kids finally recovered from their shocks of finally seeing the legendary Uchiha prodigy and quickly swarmed Sasuke and Naruto with all kinds of questions, bringing an embarrassed look to their faces. Shikamaru watched this scene with a lazy look on his face before he decided to skip the rest of today's classes and went back to the Nara compound instead and entered his family's house and found his mother preparing lunch. "Oh Shikamaru, how come you are already back?" asked Yoshino Nara. His mother, she has long, dark brown hair that was kept in a low ponytail with 3 strands framing her face, fair skin, and dark eyes. She was wearing a pink blouse and a dark-colored skirt along with an apron over it and a pair of simple hoop earrings. "Nothing much, is father home?" replied Shikamaru lazily, and his mother immediately noticed that he appeared to be lost in his own thoughts, something that couldn't escape his mother's instincts and strategist mind, so she approached him with a ladle still in her hands and responded, "He's in his office, what's wrong? Did something happen?" Shikamaru was slightly surprised by how observant his mother was before he replied with a forced smile while rubbing the back of his head, "No, nothing. I just want to talk with father." His mother squinted her eyes at him, making him flinch slightly before she rubbed his head gently and said, "You really took your father's personality, huh?" before she turned around and continued cooking. Shikamaru was confused but decided to go find his father for answers, so he directly entered his office room without even knocking, prompting a glare from Shikaku, who was sitting on his desk and reading some documents about the recent discoveries from the unearthed former flying fortress of the village hidden in the sky, as well as keeping tabs on the movements of the various hidden villages. And one news in particular caught him by surprise, which was that the aggression that the village hidden in the rocks had towards their village seemed to lessen slightly recently, leaving him confused. If only he knew about Bakurio's face-off with Onoki. "It's too tiring to knock when you can just walk in," said Shikamaru lazily, which made his father sigh helplessly at his son, who was the most talented clan member and in turn inherited their greatest trait: laziness. "Sigh. So what's going on?" asked Shikaku, surprising Shikamaru again as he could also see through his muddled thoughts. "Can they both read my mind or what?" thought Shikamaru in annoyance, and this time he didn't hold back and started recounting what happened to his father, who the moment when he heard about the boy's appearance, seemed to lose interest and kept his gaze on his paperwork while listening to Shikamaru with a lazy look on his face. "Like father like son," Shikamaru ignored this and continued his narration and ended up saying, "So father, is that kid really our age?" Hearing this, Shikaku turned to his son and asked, "Is that really what you want to ask?" Shikamaru went silent for a while before he said, "Did you know that he could use our clan's jutsu?" Shikaku put on a pondering look before he responded with a sigh, "I do, but what he uses are advanced techniques that even our clan members find hard to use." Hearing this surprised Shikamaru, so he asked again, "How strong is he?" This time, Shikaku responded immediately and said, "That's classified information. No, even the information we have might not be correct. All I can tell you, Shikamaru, is that kid might have the potential to even surpass the first Hokage." This conversation left Shikamaru speechless, and he remembered that Bakurio seemed to have promised Naruto to have ramen together later, so he decided to meet him again and ask him directly to satisfy his childish curiosity. Meanwhile, after meeting with Kushina, Minato, and Makoto, Bakurio made his way to the Hokage's office, and right now, he was having a casual conversation with Fugaku as he asked, "How's the digging going?" Fugaku had his usual stoic face as he replied, "Fine. We believe that this will boost the power of Konoha greatly if we can decipher all of their technology, especially the flying one." Bakurio nodded at this with a smile. Indeed, having a squad of flying ninja is nothing to scoff at. Fugaku nodded back while deep in thought. Why is this brat here all of a sudden? Something doesn't feel right. And his suspicions were proven right as he saw a playful smirk on Bakurio's face as he asked, "By the way, Fugaku-san, I have a favor to ask. Damn this kid. When did he ever use honorifics when he addresses me? He's definitely going to make a crazy demand." Thought Fugaku as his stoic face started to break little by little and his mouth started to twitch before he responded, "Sure. As long as it's within my capabilities." "Oh great. This is going to be easy then," said Bakurio with a smile before he said, "I want that scroll keeping the zero tail sealed." The office went silent, as if frozen in time as the air grew heavy. But it wasn't for long as Bakurio started knocking on Fugaku's desk while saying with a smirk, "Knock knock. Is anyone there?" After observing Bakurio for a while and not detecting any abnormality in him like that Dr. Shino or the puppets from the village hidden in the sky, Fugaku let out a sigh before he looked behind Bakurio and asked, "Minato, are you fine with this?" "Oh, when did you arrive, Minato?" said Bakurio with an exaggerated look on his face. Clearly he sensed his presence from the moment he appeared behind him with his flying thunder god jutsu, but was just exaggerating to ease the heavy mood. Meanwhile, Minato turned to Bakurio and asked with concern, "What do you need it for, Bakurio-kun? You should know that thing can't be killed. Otherwise, just like a tailed beast, it would respawn somewhere else with enough time. That's why the first Hokage asked Mito-sama to seal it." Fugaku agreed while saying, "Indeed, I investigated the records, and even after the second Hokage spent a lot of time trying to deal with it, he still failed at the end. Even a great genius like Tobirama, who was the originator of many of Konoha's greatest jutsu, failed to deal with that beast, so they didn't have much hopes for Bakurio to succeed and thought that he might be wanting to use it directly, which is something they will never agree to considering its dark nature, especially with Minato's disposition." However, to their surprise, Bakurio only smiled at them calmly and responded with confidence, "I can deal with it." "What makes you so confident?" asked Fugaku with a frown as Minato leaned on the desk to observe Bakurio from a better angle. Did something happen during the past few weeks? Was the thought in his mind as he watched Bakurio lifting his right hand and pointing at his eyes, which slowly started transforming into his Mangekyo Sharingan. "This is." Fugaku was slightly surprised seeing that Bakurio awakened his Mangekyo Sharingan, and he noticed that Minato had a similar look, but they quickly accepted it since they already had their guesses. "When did you awaken it?" asked Fugaku after getting over his surprise, and Bakurio simply shrugged and said, "Before Itachi." The real answer is that he didn't really know exactly how much time had passed because of all his time travels, so he gave this answer. "I see, but you should know the consequences of using our eyes too much. Are you sure you still want to proceed with your request?" asked Fugaku with a stoic look, to which Bakurio simply nodded with a smile. "Okay, I will get it for you," he said before disappearing to get the scroll from the hidden treasury inside the Anbu headquarters, leaving Minato and Bakurio alone. "How did you guess I was going to visit Fugaku?" asked Bakurio suddenly. After all, Minato appearing here wasn't in his expectation, especially when he didn't tell him about his plans. However, the latter simply shrugged and said, Kushina kept nagging me about you not staying for a longer time, so she kicked me out of the house saying if you don't bring Bakurio home, you better not come back, so I rushed searching for you. Bakurio couldn't help but let out a chuckle as this couple warmed his heart and said, that's indeed something Kushina would say and do, and a good excuse to hide your worry for me. Unfortunately for you, Minato, I could sense it very clearly, and these senses brought too many unwanted surprises for me. In the past, Bakurio had to use the full power of Jikaninki just to locate the seed of darkness in his heart, especially when it was in a dormant state. But now, with his increased sensitivity towards sensing emotions, Bakurio become capable of sensing the seed in his heart, and if he focuses his attention on a person's emotions, he could also feel if they have a seed of darkness in their hearts or not, and to his surprise during his walk throughout the village and especially the Uchiha compound, many people had them in a dormant state. Those seeds were mainly found in ninjas, but not every ninja had one. For example, Minato's heart was a clear white unblemished by any impurity, but not everyone was like him, and unfortunately, even someone like Fugaku had one and Bakurio couldn't help but start making some conjectures. Did Danzo have one? Was it affecting him? What about the previous elders of the village? What about the Hyuga family? Are there conflicts born from this seed? And if this thing goes way back, is it possible that the conflict between Madara and Hashirama wasn't something destined but man-made? After all, Hashirama clearly sensed that something was wrong with his body at the end of his life, yet he couldn't do anything about it. Many thoughts kept racing through Bakurio's head as he kept talking with Minato and told him about some of the things that he had been through, such as meeting his teacher Jiraiya and even what he's been doing with Orochimaru, which is something not many knows of. He also told him about his encounter with Onoki when he went to save Kabuto and how he spared his granddaughter and thought she could be useful for a peaceful future, which brightened Minato's mood. While they were enjoying their talk, Fugaku finally came back with a scroll in his hand and placed it on the table. Here's the scroll you wanted, what do you plan on doing now? Hearing this, Bakurio had an intrigued look on his face as he picked the scroll and unfolded it, seeing the hundreds of seals that converged in the middle like chains that held a dark closed eye-like print. It was best described as a creepy work of art. Bakurio smiled wildly before he said, the plan is simple. Before he ripped the scroll in half, to the shock of both Minato and Fugaku and the trio witnessed as a closed eye slowly rose from the print before it opened slightly, showing a hideous bloodshot eye underneath its eyelid filled with pure evil, and it immediately started growing tentacles from its body as a voice sounded in their ears. Humans, you will never get the chance to seal me again. So this is the Zero Tails, huh? And it's actually trying to stall for time. I can sense its emotions, knowing that it can't escape from this situation, so it's going to self-destruct. Hehehe, how naive, thought Bakurio, while Minato and Fugaku were on guard with the former ready to seal it again at any moment while the latter ready to prevent its escape with his Mangekyo Sharingan. However, before they could take any action, Bakurio's eyes transformed into his Mangekyo Sharingan and he calmly squashed the eye like a fly with his fingers. For a moment, the Zero Tail thought the human was an idiot, making its escape easier. However, it wasn't for long before it was shocked as one of Bakurio's eyes that had the ability Jikaninki started absorbing its dissipating chakra, while the other eye that had Yomi no Kuni absorbed its very soul. No! A huge scream echoed all around the Hokage's office that startled Fugaku and Minato as well as the Anbu guarding it, and the only reason they didn't rush inside was that Fugaku expected something like this might happen and ordered them not to. Meanwhile, the 4th and 5th Hokage simply watched as Bakurio's Mangekyo Sharingan started to shine slightly with a cold light as a hollow flame ignited in his right eye that held the power of Jikaninki before quickly fading away along with the wretched screams of Zero Tails and its existence. What the hell just happened? Asked Fugaku, who was flabbergasted, while Minato, who had some understanding with souls, understood just how terrifying what happened just now was. Absorbing people's souls means absolute death. Even Edo Tensei won't work to revive you, just got rid of an annoying fly. Replied Bakurio with a smirk while observing the illusionary screen in front of him showing many notifications. Skill Advancement Quest. Kill and absorb a creature that can manipulate emotions. Reward. Jikaninki Hide Jikaninki completed. You gained the skill Hide Jikaninki level 1 skill advancement quest. Kill and absorb the soul of 100 living creatures that have Jonin potential or higher. Reward. Yomi no Kuni High Yomi no Kuni. Current progress. 1/100th High Jikaninki Level 1. Allows the user to manipulate and observe emotions in various ways. Cost 1000 chakra per use and 1% to eyesight. This is the previous Jikaninki for reference at level 1. Jikaninki level 1 allows the user to manipulate and observe emotions in various ways. Cost 1000 chakra per use and 10% to eyesight. Good. With this, my eyes became far stronger, and the cost of using them regarding my eyesight is even lower. Not to mention how my passive increased even further, and now it doesn't require the same level of focus to sense those dormant dark seeds. While Bakurio was thinking about his improvements, another notification appeared that greatly surprised him, but he was cut off from his thought before he could read its full description. Annoying fly, you say. Fugaku let out a helpless sigh because this is something even the previous Hokages couldn't find a way to deal with. I just hope you don't use that ability too much, said Minato, and understanding what he meant, Bakurio nodded seriously at him and said, don't worry, I will only use it in similar cases to this one. That would put my heart at ease then, replied Minato with a sigh before sensing that the people were worried too much and might come inside the office despite Fugaku's orders, so he immediately teleported away to keep his identity hidden while telling Bakurio to come home soon. Thank you for listening guys, see you in the next part.